You're listening to the Andrea Tantaros Show with Jason Matera.
Keep in mind how much of a retreat this is for the modern Democratic Party. The Democrats have spent 12 years attacking the 2001-2003 Bush tax cuts. They all voted against it. Obama attacked it regularly. Now they're out there helping to preserve about 84% of those tax cuts and making them permanent. The Republicans and the taxpayers in this country have lived with a Damocles sword over their head because the Democrats so hated these tax cuts for the middle class and everybody else that they made them temporary. What the Republicans have won with this fight is permanent protection for most Americans on those taxes.
That was Grover Norquist, president of the taxpayer advocacy group, Americans for Tax Reform. And he's very famous for his no tax pledge. That was him yesterday explaining how this is a win for Republicans because most Americans actually got their tax cuts in place, and we're actually fighting Democrats on the tax cut issue. Grover's with us right now. Hi, Grover. Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.
So I think a lot of people, myself among them, is wondering how is this possibly a victory? Going from 36% to 39% for the highest earners over $400,000, couples of $450,000. How is this a win? How is that not raising taxes?
Well, you have to ask where we started and what we could have ended up with. Is it everything we wanted? No. Let's make that very, very clear. The position of taxpayers, the position of the Republican Party and the Republican leadership in House and Senate was that all of the Bush tax cuts should have been made permanent now, soon, forever. They originally voted that in the House and the Senate, but because of Senate rules, we couldn't make it permanent in the past. And this is an opportunity, because it takes 60 votes in the Senate to make these things permanent. What happened was Obama was planning to allow much of the Bush tax cuts to lapse, not just for high-income people, but for everybody. If you followed his campaign in 2012, he said a very interesting thing, and he said it over and over again, so it wasn't a slip of the lip. He said, unlike the previous promise in 2008, I'll never raise any taxes of any kind on anyone who makes more than $200,000 a year, the promise he made this time was, my plan is if you make less than $200,000 a year, I won't raise your income taxes next year. Two changes. He only promised to protect the income tax. And second, he only wanted to protect the Bush income tax cuts.
But Grover, that you deal with Republicans and a no tax pledge. And not only did taxes go up, I know Obama was shooting for $250,000, and we got $400,000. Big whoop, $150,000 in income. Those income earners got spared. But if you're making $50K to $70K, your taxes have gone up $822, $100K to $200, they're going up $1,700, $500 to $1 million, $14,000, and you have Republicans that let this happen. Many of them signed your no tax pledge, so they just blew you up.
Oh, couple of things. One is, keep in mind where we were heading if nothing had happened. If nothing had happened, there was a $500 billion tax increase happening. So it's not as if the Republicans could have stopped this. You couldn't throw yourself on a train and stop it. If the Republican House had voted no, then what would have happened was instead of having a tax increase, 15% of the Bush tax increase disappearing, 100% of it would have disappeared. We were put in a very awkward position, and that's why if that was the only fight ever taking place in the next 20 years, I'd be very disappointed. But here's what we've got. Taxes actually, technically, formally, legally, went up January 1st. $500 billion for this next year, and then we cut them back. So people who had made a commitment not to vote for tax increases actually kept that commitment, as irritating as it is. Taxes went up because
let me step in here. Jason Matera here. Thanks for coming on. And listen, we know the Americans for Tax Reform does solid work, great work, and I don't want you to think this is just a dump on you. But there are many conservatives who are irritated because they look to you, they look to ATR as a watchdog for politicians. So taxes went up from 2012 to 2013. They're not looking to play the semantics game, but they look at you for that leadership and guidance. And I know you're famous for in D.C. saying the Republican Party has a branding issue. Voters don't know what they're getting. And now the White House is touting the Republican Party's brand as helping them raise taxes on the highest income earners, the income earners who are going to help spur economic growth, because we know that not all tax cuts are created equal.
Look, absolutely, and that is why the position that the taxpayers and the Republicans were put in over the last 10 years of having this tax increase over your head, where if you did nothing, taxes would go up, that has been removed. Take a look at where we stand in terms of the correlation of forces. Right now, we got 85% of the Bush tax cuts made permanent going out into the future. Is that everything we want? No, but the game didn't end, okay? We're not even in that.
So what's the game?
Time.
What's the new game, Grover? Tell us.
Well, here's the key thing. And the good news is that the president had all of the clout in the last 2 months, and now it shifts to the good guys. 3 fights coming up. Sequestration begins to hit. A $1.2 trillion spending cut becomes automatic in 2 months. What Mitch McConnell did was he separated that away from this tax fight that we had and said, which is exactly the right thing to do, because now the Republican position is, okay, that will take effect unless somebody comes up with a replacement that saves as much money. The Republicans in the House have already passed one. Now the Senate can have some votes. 2, after that fight, which I believe the Republicans will win and will save $1.2 trillion, either elegantly or inelegantly, but we'll save it. Second, you have the debt ceiling coming up, and Geithner will pick a date. He'll pull it out of his sleeve because he just makes it up. Yeah,
he already pulled out December 31st.
Yeah, that
which
was a
very
lie.
Suspicious.
The next one will be a lie too. But anyway, we'll eventually settle on a lie that we can all agree on.
But Grover, why do you trust the Republicans to actually engage Obama in the next fight? I mean, you had the Senate Republicans who voted for a bill they did not read, that was not publicly scored. They were actually it was sent to them at 1:30. The roll call vote was around 1:45. I mean, this was just Washington inside dealing at its worst. And to even furthermore, Barack Obama is saying that we need even more revenues. They're not satisfied with the taxes that were increased. They want even more tax increases.
Yeah, because they got us to hold on the one thing that we've said for the last decade. The one thing that we have made our own. Republicans don't raise taxes. It's all Mitt Romney was saying. We folded like cheap suits.
Well, of course, if Romney had focused on that a little more, he might have ended up as president.
Well, Romney's not here. It's not the problem.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys signed your pledge, Grover. Toomey, Senator Barroso, Ron Johnson. How did you lose these guys? And frankly, I mean, should we return these incumbents? Are you going to try and primary them? Because they broke your pledge.
No, actually, guys, they didn't, and we shouldn't. That's what the president's trying to say in order to get them to vote for tax increases in the future. Because we lived for 10 years in this upside-down world where if you did nothing, taxes went up, and you had to affirmatively act to keep taxes from going up. We left that world. And now, from now on, it's going to be crystal clear you have to vote the House and the Senate and the President to ever raise taxes in the future. That changes the correlation of forces. It puts the Republican House in a complete capacity to block. The Republican House could not block what happened. If they'd said no to any agreement in the last week, what you'd have gotten was something significantly worse, which is
the Republican House Republican House pushed through a Democrat bill. That's what happened. The majority. This bill would have never passed if it were not for the overwhelming support from Democrats.
And if it didn't pass, there would have been instead of a $60 billion tax increase, there would have been a $500 billion tax increase beginning today. Again, look, we were in a very awkward position that we put ourselves in, that the other team put ourselves in, that we wandered into, and it is very important for clarity in communicating with the American people that we get out of that mess, which this deal, as unpleasant as it is in many of its aspects, that rights the ship. From now on, it is crystal clear. If you cannot raise,
I think it's crystal clear. I'm glad you're very optimistic, Grover, but I think it's crystal clear now that Republicans, they can't all be trusted not to raise taxes. I mean, I just don't see how you tell a guy making $50,000 that his taxes aren't higher. I mean, I worked on the Hill. I used to try and spin all of these things that the House used to do. I don't know how you spin this one. It's relative. It could have been worse. I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily a winning argument.
Let's not take the president's position. Let's take the correct taxpayer position, which is you do the best you can by taxpayers. And from now on, this fight is crystal clear, and we have three big spending fights: sequestration, debt ceiling, and continuing resolution. There, the power is on our side, and we should take all of the righteous anger that congressmen and senators have who feel completely jammed by the situation they were just in, which was completely untenable. Because you're right. It looks like they did something that they couldn't have stopped in the first place. The president.
Right. It looks like they're saying it's better to fight and abandon your principles than to fight and lose. And Grover, thanks for coming on today. We were dying to ask you these questions. This anger is felt all across the country, and they better do exactly what you said that they should do coming up on those 3 points. Grover Norquist, everybody, he's a president of the taxpayer advocacy group Americans for Tax Reform. You can follow him on Twitter, Grover Norquist. Grover, thanks for coming on the program. We appreciate it. Coming up, what do you think? 1-800-876-4123. 1-800-876-4123. Give us a call. Tell us what you think. Or do you think the GOP has totally lost their principles? You're listening to Andrea Tantaros.
The Andrea Tantaros Show with Jason Matera. It's the Andrea Tantaros Show with Jason Matera. Call now. 1-800-876-4123. The Andrea Tantaros Show.